Hey you guys. So, if you were with me earlier and you saw the broadcast that kept getting cut in and out, I apologize. I don't know that this will work better, but so far so good. I'm just going to review quickly some of the things I talked about just a minute ago about the Fringeless class. So this is a really great opportunity to take a class with Sarah Swett, who is a wonderful tapestry weaver who lives in Idaho. She has been doing the forced selvage technique for quite a long time, and she agreed to do this class with me, which is wonderful because she is a ton of fun. The online class is called Fringeless, and it's about creating tapestries that don't have any fringe or hems. So it's a tapestry like this. This is one that I did years ago. And it comes off the loom like this, so there's no hem at the top or finishing. Here's one that Sarah did. This is actually one that she wove during the class, and we're going to be having a drawing for this particular tapestry on July 9. So if you register for that class before then, you can see her weave this in the class. But again, no hems, and she uses a technique where she pulls the weft all the way into the tapestry, so when she takes it off the loom, it actually looks like that. Here's another little guy that I did a while back. Again, no, this one was with Weaver's Bazaar. You can see the tails on the back, but no hem. And I wanted today to answer a few questions about the class. Some of this is a repeat from some of what you could hear a few minutes ago, but some of you couldn't hear any of it at all. So I just think that this class is a great opportunity to work with a real master at this technique. Sarah has been weaving for decades. She started weaving on a Glamacra floor loom, and then she moved to an upright Shannock, and now she uses pipe looms, and she's a lot of fun. So she has tons of tips about how to weave tapestry, and some of the stuff she does is quite different from what I do. So it's nice to learn from a different teacher. The class focuses on how to warp a loom with the resulting tapestry not having any fringe or hems, and you also don't have to use a header to weave it. So you just start right off with your weaving, and at the top you lock everything in and then you're done. So if you don't know Sarah, check out her website, afieldguidetoneedlework.com. It's great. Her blog is really funny. You should follow it no matter what. Even if you don't ever want to do a forced selvage tapestry, just hearing Sarah talk about tapestry weaving is a real fun thing. So make sure you look at her blog, afieldguidetoneedlework.com, or just Google Sarah Swett, S-W-E-T-T, Sarah Swett Tapestry, and you'll find it. So I'm totally thrilled by all the excitement surrounding this class. And a lot of you have questions about looms and jigs, and what I want to say clearly is that that is what the class is about. I will answer, Sarah mostly, will answer all of those questions in the class. So I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I have seen a few things online already that I don't really think are going to work very well. So it might be good to actually wait and see what we're teaching in the class before you jump too hard into trying to make all the equipment. The class is partly about what equipment you need. There's no rush. My online courses are available anytime that you need them. So I know you're excited, but it will be there for as long as you need it, and there's no prize for the person who finishes the first tapestry. So there's some different trailers on my YouTube channel, and you can check those out. Also a page on my website with more information and some questions. There were some questions about making equipment, and I do want to address them a little bit. Oh, good, Cliff, you asked that question again. Great, I'll get to it in a second. Cliff asked a good question before, and I believe by the time I was answering the question, I was talking to myself. So I will address it again, Cliff. Thank you. I just want to show you that you can actually make a jig. You need some kind of a jig for this technique to wrap the warp around, and there are many ways to do it. Some of them involve sticks and string. So if you can tie knots and use sticks and string or a strap, you can make a jig. This is the jig I like. This is made out of PVC. You need one simple tool to make this. You go and buy a length of, this is 1/2-inch PVC. It comes in all different sizes. Buy a piece of 1/2-inch PVC, and you can cut PVC with a hacksaw, which is a very simple little saw, or you can use a rotary cutter like this. This also cuts copper pipe, so if you're going to make a pipe loom, this might be your tool. It's not actually sharp. There's a little rotary wheel in there. It just cuts by friction. PVC is very soft. So you put the pipe in here and you rotate it around and it will cut your pipe. You might need a ruler so that your pieces are the same length. The other thing you can use is a PVC pipe cutter. This cuts like butter. It's great, but it's a little more dangerous. So if you're interested in something that can't cut you, go with the rotary cutter. I just want to say that you can make a jig. If, however, you are someone who absolutely feels like you can't go into a hardware store and there's no way you're going to make anything, then this probably isn't the class for you. This is a class about a little bit about innovation and figuring out how to make things work. So if you want to take on that challenge, making a jig is something that if you have even just moderate hand skills, you'll be able to do. So I'm going to encourage you to do it. Anne says she's used gardening shears to cut PVC. So it's really soft. Actually, copper pipe is also quite soft. So we're not talking about owning many tools. I don't own very many tools. So you don't have to have a lot of fancy stuff. It's just about creativity and resourcefulness and being willing to experiment. So I'm challenging you to believe that you can make a simple jig. A few questions from, mostly from people named Anne, but they're not all the same Anne. So I'm going to talk more about Navajo weaving, Anne, in the class, but basically Navajo weaving is on a loom where you weave all the way from the bottom to the very top of the loom, and there's no shed. By the time you get to the top, you have to needle weave your stuff. In this loom, in this particular way of weaving, you have a shed the whole way. This is my Murex, and you can see the warp I'm going to weave on is here. It stops right here. This is supplemental warp. This is the kind of shed I get, which makes the weaving wonderful. Weaving on a Navajo loom is a tradition, and they make amazing, beautiful things, but the weaving is a lot harder because there's not a big shed to open to get your weft in. Does this method work better with certain types of warp than others? In this method of weaving, your warp will actually go like this. It will zigzag back and forth. And so it is doubled in the weaving, which means that sometimes if your piece is at a small enough set, you will need a thinner warp. So the 12/6 cotton seam twine works great at 8 EPI. If that's what you have, you can use that for the warp and for the supplemental warp, and it's fine. If you want to weave at a narrower set, I recommend getting 20/6 cotton seam twine, which is thinner. Or there's a lot of wool warps, and we're going to talk about different wool warps in the class. You could also use linen. Whatever your normal warp is, you can use. Just know that it's going to be fatter in this technique, and you might need to downsize the warp. Can it be worked with a shedding device? Yes. I assume you're talking about a Murex. And so I don't have the shedding device on here, but you would just put it in here and put your heddles on. But we're going to make a different set of heddles because you can see that on a Murex, the warp is usually at the front of this bar. And in this technique, it's not a continuous warp. The warp sits farther back. So the heddles that come with the Murex or that you buy for the Murex are too short. They work depending on your supplemental warp, but they tend to make the warp walk, which means that you will put on a beautiful square warp and you'll do a couple picks and your warp will be all messed up. So longer heddles will help fix that. And I will show you how to do that in the class. Can the warp be advanced, or is the height of the working area the height of the project? It cannot be advanced. This is not a continuous warp. Sarah has woven very large pieces using an extended version of this warping, and she'll talk about that a little bit in the class. We don't teach you how to do that, and that isn't even a continuous warp. So the height of the warp that you put on for the tapestry is how big the piece is going to be. This works really well for smaller size tapestries. If you want to weave something really big for selvage, you're either going to need a really huge loom or you're going to have to get really creative with how you warp it. For the Merrick's loom, this is from Nan. Do we need foot extensions and how long should they be? So I like extenders on my Merrick's. This is the 12-inch little guy. This loom is short anyway. I think that this loom should be longer in general. So I always use 6-inch extenders on this loom. Right now I have 12-inch extenders, which are not all the way extended, but a 12-inch piece of threaded rod added with a coupling nut. This is called a coupling nut. 1/2-inch threaded rod, $1.57 at the hardware store. The foot extenders on the Merrick's are 7 inches long. That's a pretty good length. You could probably buy PVC pipe that would fit over the current legs and make your legs longer, just a tip. Otherwise, Merrick's does sell these, and those aluminum feet are really nice. So hopefully that helps out there, Nan. Jeannie and Michelle both asked about fly line backing, and I want to tell you very strongly that fishing line is not the same thing as fly line backing. They are very, very different things. You will not be using fishing line for this course. No, 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 no. Filament, monofilament, anything with those kind of things, anything that looks like plastic is not going to work. You want fly line backing, or you just use cotton seam twine. It works great as a supplemental warp. The fly line backing, 20-pound fly line backing, comes in neon crazy colors. However, it also comes in white, and I highly recommend the white because looking at this color as you're weaving a tapestry can really influence how you feel about the tapestry. I actually cut one off completely because I had warped it with this orange, and I hated the tapestry so much. When I cut it off, I realized that it was the color of the fly line backing. Fly line backing is braided. That's why it works so well for this. Because it's braided, it doesn't get all twisty with all the repeated use. Fishing line won't work, so you want fly line backing. Or just use cotton seam twine. If you already have it, it works fine. Barbara asked, why is the warp so long? It seems like such a waste. So what I want to say about that is, it's not a waste, Barbara. It's actually more economical than any other warping I've ever done. So this is the warp I'm using. This is my tapestry warp, and every single bit of it is going to be woven except maybe 8 inches worth of tails. So I've used 100% of the warp there, or 99.5% of the warp. This is supplemental warp, and it can be reused over and over and over and over. So it's actually better than a technique where you're wasting a whole bunch of warp that you're not weaving. The fly line backing is really great for reusing. It doesn't get all twisted up, so it's a great material if you want to be able to reuse that material over and over. The reason the warp is so long is because it's a joy to weave on a big open shed. Sure, you can weave on little tiny looms, and they're a lot of fun, but the weaving on a big shed is kind of a joy. So Margaret asked if the class is done at your own pace. She has stuff going on this summer. Summer's a horrible time, of course. My classes, like all my online classes, are always open. You can use the class anytime you want after you've registered and the content is open. Anytime you want. If you want to do the class in 2 years, you can. If you want to redo the class in 2 years, you can. So not a problem with that. Whatever you have going on is fine. The only thing is that the discount that is in effect right now does end. So if you want a better price, then you might register earlier. Karen asked if a Merrick's can be used and what adaptations need to be made to the loom. Yes, you can use a Merrick's. I will show you specifically in the class. I just talked about the extenders, which I think are really helpful. I think even 6-inch extenders on any of the looms will be helpful for this technique. I don't have any of the really large Merixes, so I actually don't have a good idea in my head of how tall those go. But you do want quite a lot of length. 12 to 18 inches of warp is what Sarah recommends above your tapestry warp. So that means your loom has to be pretty long if you want that ease of weaving. If you don't care if your shed is only this long, then you can make a much smaller warp, much shorter loom. So for the Mirex, we're going to have to make some longer heddles if you want to use the shedding device. It works just like a fancy pipe loom. I mean, a Mirex is just a pipe loom. So it works like any other pipe loom. It's just that if you want to use the shedding device, you'll probably have to make a little bit longer heddles, and the extenders are really nice on it. Not 100% necessary, actually, none of that is. I've been using this Mirex without the shedding device. It works fine. Pamela asked if I have pictures of the PVC jig I've made for the class. And, well, yes I do. They're in the class. We're going to talk about jigs a ton. We're going to talk about this kind of jig. We'll talk about jigs you can make with sticks and string. We'll have plans for all of them. So if you wait till the class opens, we'll show you how to make one. Jean asked, can the supplemental warp be used again without rewarding? I think that's a, computers changed your words, Jean. Do you have to cut it off and, rewarp? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Every time you do a new warp, you have to redo it. So, yeah, there's no way to leave it on and like hook up a new tapestry warp. You have to re-string the whole thing every time. So yes, this technique is a little bit fussy for sure. Let me answer Cliff's question before I forget. Cliff asked whether this technique was easier or different than, Martina, I think that's in German. I don't speak German. Jean says, arg! Yes, so it's a little fussy, but this technique gets faster the more you do it. It's quite a bit of fun. I think I can put on a 4 selvage warp for a fairly small piece in about a half an hour now. So it's about the same as it would take you to warp your Mirex regularly. Cliff's question was about Susan Martin Maffei. All of this information, and I definitely, oh good, Martina. That's fabulous. Susan Martin Maffei is where most of this information came from. She is a brilliant tapestry weaver. Her partner is Archie Brennan, which you will hear about in the course also. Susan has taught 4 selvage warping for a long time, and she teaches a method that's a little bit different, but Sarah learned from her. So her method, as Cliff is asking about, doesn't involve a jig. It involves using a stick and wrapping the bottom. The bottom supplemental warp is wrapped right around the bottom bar of the loom. That's a fine way to do it. The jig makes it just a little bit easier to get things nice and even, and the jig allows you to replicate the tapestry. So if I'm using a particular size jig, I could make 10 tapestries that were this exact size if I wanted to. I mean, maybe I don't, but it's hard to do that on any kind of jig that is just made out of sticks. So this kind of a jig that's real sturdy is an easy way to make multiples of the same size tapestry. And you can put the warp on this jig before you put it on the loom, which for some people is easier to get the tension nice and even. Here's another tip. If you're at the hardware store, get blue tape, blue painter's tape. It's like your third hand. I use it all the time when I'm warping. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question about Susan. Susan teaches this technique in their DVD series. If you have the Archie Brennan, Susan Martin Maffei DVD series, which you can buy on their website, just Google Archie Brennan Tapestry. She has a whole segment in there, which is maybe half an hour long, about how to do the 4 selvage warping her way without the jig. Okay, where was I in my questions? A different Anne asked, can you only weave 1 tapestry per warp? This goes with your question, Jean. Yes, you can only weave 1 tapestry per warp. Yes, you have to rewarp it every time you do a new tapestry. This is true of any tapestry, and although yes, if you have a loom where you can put on a really long warp, then you can weave a bunch of pieces before you have to warp again. she also asked about shedding devices on other kinds of pipe looms, and I've noticed that some of the people in the class have made looms from other people's plans. They're not the plans we're using in the class, and so they have leash bars on them. And Sarah doesn't use leashes, so the looms we're using look like this one. But this does have a T on the top, and I actually do have a leash bar for this loom, which I have used in the past. So leashes are a way to make one of the sheds. The pull shed can have leashes on it, which are just great big heddles that go to the back layer of warp so you can pull it forward. You can do what Sarah does and use an open shed and then a pick shed, or you can use the Merrick shedding device. There are other kinds of shedding you could use. I've seen people do bundles of pull heddles. There's lots of different ideas you could use if you need a shedding device. Let me make sure. Okay. So yeah, there were a few things I saw online that I don't actually think are going to work that well for this class, but y'all will learn that when you go to put it together. For the rest of you who are patient, we will show you how to make all the things you need to make. If you really don't want to make anything and you have a Mirex, I'm going to show you some ways to make a jig out of dowels or aluminum rod. That doesn't involve cutting anything except maybe a dowel. So you may actually have to have the hardware store guy cut those in half for you. Or go to Michael's where you can buy short lengths. And I think that's most of it. I want to encourage you to experiment, and the class is really fun. Sarah is fabulous. She gives you so many different weaving tips. There's whole segments where we're talking about tapestry weaving and what we like and don't like and how different people do things and how we differ in how we do things. She talks a lot about using bobbins and some other stuff that I don't talk about as much in my classes. So I hope that it will be a lot of fun. I also hope that you've been able to see this broadcast versus the last one. If you have more questions, just put them on the Facebook machine. I'm also going to put this video on YouTube for all the people who don't like Facebook. Thanks so much, you guys, for sticking around and coming back after the first issue. And next time I'll be more careful about how my internet's working. Have a great day, and I will see you all again soon in the Fringeless class.